Hey everybody, welcome to my Suburban Oasis. My name's Soleil and I garden here in mid-Michigan in a zone 5B, and it is a glorious day today. It was a glorious day yesterday when I first filmed this, but during the filming we had some technical issues, so we're gonna do some extra kind of work here to make sure that this video can get out to you. So I'm gonna introduce all of the different areas that we did work in, talk a little bit about what that project was, and then we'll show you the footage from yesterday. All right, let's get started. So first up, we have a lemon jade sedum, and it is hardy all the way down to zone 3 and I believe up to zone 8, and it is a really great plant in terms of needing full sun, and it has drought tolerance. It gets about 18 inches tall by about 24 inches wide. So I want to add it into this front bed area because I think it needs a little bit more of a height differential between the black lace elderberry and the front. So we're going to move one of the ornamental alliums that I placed, and we're going to put the lemon jade sedum right there. Let's get going.
The lemon jade sedum was really large in this pot, so it was big enough that I felt like I could cut it in half and create two separate plants. It was incredibly sturdy though, so I needed to saw at it a bit with the side of the shovel as well as dig straight through it. Sedum is really easy to propagate. It likes full sun, good drainage, and not too much water. So I planted an allium in front here, a millennium allium. And so I'm just going to dig it up now, and I'm going to move it a little bit further towards the front of the bed because I think it is such a low growing plant and doesn't have significant height to it that it'll be better in the front of the border. And right now I'm pulling up a rudbeckia that I planted there, and we'll decide later if I'm going to plant that elsewhere or not. I didn't really like the yellow color in this bed during the summer when it bloomed. But I have two other alliums in the same area, and so that trio is going to really make a nice pop of color, and I like the form of it as well. It's important to make sure that you dig a really good hole for sedum, but it doesn't have super thick roots and it's not very dense, so you don't have to dig as wide as you may for like a shrub or some other type of plant. I had two separate cuttings from this plant. One of them was rather upright and the other one was kind of droopy. So in this particular area, I wanted to utilize the one that was very upright in habit so that it would stay in place really well. And I think that the color will contrast well with that black elderberry.
Well, next up we have a pot that has just what looks like a stick in it, and it is actually a peegee hydrangea cutting, and I was growing it on and I dug it up because it was going to get too big for the space that it was in and planted it in a pot. So it just looks kind of like a dead stick for now, but it should be fine by next spring. So I thought it would be nice to take some of the Angelina sedums that I found for 50% off. They were about $3.50 each, and fill this pot with them so that it doesn't look like an empty pot throughout the winter. Let's start on this project.
Right now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this hydrangea that I planted here, which is a peegee hydrangea. It was grown from a cutting, and I dug it up the other day from the ground, and I just didn't get it watered in that great initially, so all of the leaves dried up. But that's okay. It should be fine in the springtime. Unfortunately, it just looks like a stick in the pot for now, so I thought it'd be helpful to put these in. These are Angelina sedums, and they grow just like the other lemon coral sedum that we just talked about, or lemon jade sedum that we just talked about, which is they like to have really good drainage. So I'm planting them a little bit higher in the pot to ensure that they don't get waterlogged over the winter. That is one of the number one ways that plants die back in my area in the winter time if you pot them, because we have lots of snow and plenty of rain and snow, so they can die back that way. Two of these plants should cover the pot really generously and look very nice throughout the winter. It is semi-evergreen, so hopefully we'll have something to look at, and it will provide a nice kind of waterfall over the edge of the pots. I don't anticipate it will grow much between now and spring, but at least it's something pretty to look at until we get to spring. Much better than looking at what looks like a dead stick.
All right, so I found a candy coral berry volunteer in this area. So what I want to do is take out a peegee hydrangea cutting that I've been growing in this area and replace it with that candy coral berry volunteer, because the peegee hydrangea is going to get much too big for this space, and the pinky winky hydrangea that I have here is going to fill in the space just nicely. So I don't need that extra. It was just kind of some filler for the time being as the pinky winky got bigger. So we'll dig up the peegee hydrangea, we'll move the coral berry plant, and then we're going to plant the peegee hydrangea in a new spot. All right, let's do it.
This peegee hydrangea is something I grew from a cutting about 2 years ago. I was simply doing trimmings off of my peegee hydrangea standard and stuck the stick in the ground at about the end of March. And by summertime, it had rooted in and was doing really well. So I planted it over here again as a filler until this pinky winky hydrangea got big enough to really fill in the space. And I lucked out by finding this little coral berry. This one is called Candy Coral Berry, and it's by First Editions. And one of the berries must have fallen and turned into a new plant. So that's fantastic for me. And we're just going to plant that in this bed because it doesn't get as big as the peegee hydrangea does. It'll be just the perfect size. You can see on the left there that is a coral berry that I planted a few years ago.
All right, well, we are going to take some time to dig up a barberry that is over here, because the barberry is doing okay, but it's not thriving. So rather than just have it survive, I'm going to dig it up and we're going to put it in an area with more sun. That way we can really see its vibrant colors and it can thrive in a better way. And instead of having that here, what I'm going to do is put the peegee hydrangea here, because it's going to look really nice on this corner of the house, bring some height in over the years, and just really fill in so that we aren't staring at just a brick wall. I think it's going to be gorgeous here. All right, let's dig in. By the way, you will see me using a shovel that I get asked questions on all of the time. It is a root slayer shovel, and it is linked in the description below the video. So if you want to check it out, feel free.
Now I'm going to be transplanting this barberry. Like I said, it just didn't do very well in this particular location. It's called a limoncello barberry, and it should have some depth of color similar to the other two that I have in the back garden, and it's really more of a chartreuse, and it's all on the new growth when it comes out, but it just was not performing like that in this area because it was too high up under the eaves and didn't get any sun until late in the afternoon. So we'll be moving that one for sure. I've got some ideas to where that one's going to go. This hydrangea won't need a very big hole because it has very shallow roots, similar to many other hydrangeas. But one of the downsides to that is that it definitely needs to make sure, you definitely need to make sure that you get it watered in really well after you plant it.
Okay, so we're in a new area of the garden, and in this area I have my Bar Harbor Seaside Serenade hydrangeas, and I absolutely love them, but one of them has been over here and planted in the sun, and it's just getting a little bit too much sun and not enough hydration, and so it kind of wilts towards the end of the day in late summer, especially this year because of our drought. So I want to put it back a little bit into an area where there's a little bit less sun, and hopefully it will really be nice and bushy just like the one next to it. But in order to do that, I'm going to need to dig out a barberry, and I'm also then going to need to move the hydrangea, and I want to make sure that I'm going to get some compost, because when I get compost it's going to really help this hydrangea, and we really need organic matter around it to help with the soil in this area. We have the plum tree that it's going to compete with the roots of, and there's also a giant maple tree that my neighbor has on the other side of the fence, which really sucks the moisture out of the soil as well as the nutrients. So the compost is going to set this hydrangea up for success in its new planting spot.
So this is a Tuscan barberry, another barberry that, because it's back by the fence and behind the arborvitae, which is on the south side, it only gets early eastern sun, which just isn't enough for it to really color up and grow and be incredibly beautiful. It is a very pretty plant, but this is just not the right site for it. I thought it would have plenty of sun, but just not enough hours. Luckily, it's only been in this spot for 1.5 full years, so it's pretty easy for me to dig up and move. I'm going to leave the hostas here, even though I thought I was going to move them, just because they'll help to fill in the area if the hydrangea doesn't get as big next year. But I think we're going to have really good success with it after we move it. So I think it looks really nice paired up with the other one in that area. But what I want to do now is go get some organic material because the soil that's in the back there is so dry and is lacking organic material. This compost that I collected from my way back is probably about 70% or 80% composted. There's still some fairly large chunks of material in it, but that will just continue to break down over time. So I'm really happy with the kind of texture of this, and it's going to really help this hydrangea succeed because it's going to need this in order to help maintain the moisture. It's definitely competing with both the plum tree as well as the arborvitae that are near it for nutrients and moisture. And then on the other side of the fence from it, there's a very large tree that is planted in the neighbors, which is like a Norway maple, I believe, and it's been there for many years. It's gigantic, and those roots can go out probably 50, maybe 70 feet away from the trunk of the tree and absorb nutrients and moisture as well. So I'm going to pretty much use about a 90 to 10% compost to soil ratio with this hydrangea to help it thrive better in this area.
All right, next up we're going to plant some more of the lemon jade sedum, and we're going to take the other half that we divided off from the front bed and we're going to plant it right back here, and I think that's going to fill in front of this hydrangea very nicely. So let's get that done. So now you can see what it looks like after we're done, and I really like the way that it looks. I think the nice billowy clouds of the sedum will go really well with the billowy clouds of the hydrangeas, and it's going to fill in this area nicely. And I don't know if you can see, but right in that area that I just pointed to is a small clipping of some of the sedum that fell off as branches. Sedum will root really easily, so I've just tucked it into that area to help fill in that gap as well. This is a really dry bed. It gets full sun, so the sedums should be very happy here. I did not use any compost when I planted the sedum. So right here is where I put the Toscano barberry, which has some very nice deep red foliage. So that is planted in an area where we just recently had some trees taken out, so this is full sun now. And in the 2 cages are 7 sunflower bushes. What I will say is they've been struggling because they weren't getting enough light and the deer like to eat them. So they are in cages now, and hopefully they'll get bigger and the deer will eat something else, but we'll see. Then in addition to that, I planted the limoncello barberry right here. So I think this really starts to bring a little bit of color and defining the boundary of the edge of our property here. It's not a lot to look at right now, but as it fills in over time and we see some of these little teeny tiny cuttings that I used for the forsythias, that will help grow next year as well. So over the next few years, we'll definitely see some progress in this area. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video despite our technical difficulties. I definitely appreciate all of you joining me all of the time. It's great. I really enjoy the comments that you make about the projects that you're working on and how things are growing in your yard. I get a lot of questions about things that you guys are working on and issues that you may be facing, and I hope that some of my responses to you are helpful and that you're having a great time out in the garden still. All right, well, thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.